You spoke of outrage just now, Avditia Romanovna. In that case you may be sure I've taken measures. Sofia Semyonovna is not at home. The Kapernamovs are far away, there are 5 locked rooms between. I am at least twice as strong as you are, and I have nothing to fear besides, for you could not complain afterwards. You surely would not be willing actually to betray your brother. Besides, no one would believe you. How should a girl have come alone to visit a solitary man in his lodgings, so that even if you do sacrifice your brother, you could prove nothing? It is very difficult to prove an assault, Avditia Romanovna. Scoundrel, whispered Dounia indignantly. As you like, but observe I was only speaking by way of a general proposition. It's my personal conviction that you are perfectly right. Violence is hateful. I only spoke to show you that you need have no remorse even if you were willing to save your brother of your own accord, as I suggest to you. You would be simply submitting to circumstances, to violence in fact, if we must use that word. Think about it. Your brother S and your mother's fate are in your hands. I will be your slave. All my life, I will wait here. Svidrigailov sat down on the sofa about 8 steps from Dounia. She had not the slightest doubt now of his unbending determination. Besides, she knew him. Suddenly she pulled out of her pocket a revolver, cocked it and laid it in her hand on the table. Svidrigailov jumped up. Aha, so that's it, is it? He cried, surprised but smiling maliciously. Well, that completely alters the aspect of affairs. You've made things wonderfully easier for me, Avditia Romanovna. But where did you get the revolver? Was it Mr. Razumihin? Why, it's my revolver, an old friend. And how I've hunted for it. The shooting lessons I've given you in the country have not been thrown away. It's not your revolver, it belonged to Marfa Petrovna, whom you killed, wretch. There was nothing of yours in her house. I took it when I began to suspect what you were capable of. If you dare to advance one step, I swear I'll kill you. She was frantic. But your brother, I ask from curiosity, said Svidrigailov, still standing where he was. Inform if you want to, don't stir, don't come nearer, I'll shoot. You poisoned your wife, I know, you are a murderer yourself. She held the revolver ready. Are you so positive? I poisoned Marfa Petrovna. You did, you hinted it yourself, you talked to me of poison. I know you went to get it. You had it in readiness. It was your doing. It must have been your doing, scoundrel. Even if that were true, it would have been for your sake. You would have been the cause. You are lying, I hated you always, always. Oho, Avditia Romanovna, you seem to have forgotten how you softened to me in the heat of propaganda. I saw it in your eyes. Do you remember that moonlight night when the nightingale was singing? That's a lie, there was a flash of fury in Dounia's eyes. That's a lie and a libel. A lie? Well, if you like, it's a lie, I made it up. Women ought not to be reminded of such things, he smiled. I know you will shoot, you pretty wild creature. Well, shoot away. Dounia raised the revolver, and deadly pale, gazed at him, measuring the distance and awaiting the first movement on his part. Her lower lip was white and quivering, and her big black eyes flashed like fire. He had never seen her so handsome. The fire glowing in her eyes at the moment she raised the revolver seemed to kindle him, and there was a pang of anguish in his heart. He took a step forward and a shot rang out. The bullet grazed his hair and flew into the wall behind. He stood still and laughed softly. The wasp has stung me, she aimed straight at my head. What's this? Blood. He pulled out his handkerchief to wipe the blood, which flowed in a thin stream down his right temple. The bullet seemed to have just grazed the skin. Dounia lowered the revolver and looked at Svidrigailov not so much in terror as in a sort of wild amazement. She seemed not to understand what she was doing and what was going on. Well, you missed. Fire again, I'll wait, said Svidrigailov softly, still smiling but gloomily. If you go on like that, I shall have time to seize you before you cock again. Dounia started, quickly cocked the pistol and again raised it. Let me be, she cried in despair. I swear I'll shoot again, I'll kill you. Well, at 3 paces you can hardly help it, but if you don't, then, his eyes flashed and he took 2 steps forward. Dounia shot again, it missed fire. You haven't loaded it properly. Never mind, you have another charge there. Get it ready, I'll wait. He stood facing her, 2 paces away, waiting and gazing at her with wild determination, with feverishly passionate, stubborn, set eyes. Dounia saw that he would sooner die than let her go. And, now, of course she would kill him at 2 paces. Suddenly she flung away the revolver. She dropped it, said Svidrigailov with surprise, and he drew a deep breath. A weight seemed to have rolled from his heart, perhaps not only the fear of death, indeed he may scarcely have felt it at that moment. It was the deliverance from another feeling, darker and more bitter, which he could not himself have defined. He went to Dounia and gently put his arm round her waist. She did not resist, but trembling like a leaf, looked at him with suppliant eyes. He tried to say something, but his lips moved without being able to utter a sound. "Let me go," Dounia implored. Svidrigailov shuddered. Her voice now was quite different. "Then you don't love me?" he asked softly. Dounia shook her head. And you can't, never," he whispered in despair. "Never." There followed a moment of terrible, dumb struggle in the heart of Svidrigailov. He looked at her with an indescribable gaze. Suddenly he withdrew his arm, turned quickly to the window and stood facing it. Another moment passed. "Here's the key." He took it out of the left pocket of his coat and laid it on the table behind him, without turning or looking at Dounia. "Take it, make haste." He looked stubbornly out of the window. Dounia went up to the table to take the key. Make haste," repeated Svidrigailov, still without turning or moving, but there seemed a terrible significance in the tone of that "make haste." Dounia understood it, snatched up the key, flew to the door, unlocked it quickly and rushed out of the room. A minute later, beside herself, she ran out onto the canal bank in the direction of X Bridge. Svidrigailov remained 3 minutes standing at the window. At last he slowly turned, looked about him and passed his hand over his forehead. A strange smile contorted his face, a pitiful, sad, weak smile, a smile of despair. The blood, which was already getting dry, smeared his hand. He looked angrily at it, then wetted a towel and washed his temple. The revolver which Dounia had flung away lay near the door and suddenly caught his eye. He picked it up and examined it. It was a little pocket 3-barrel revolver of old-fashioned construction. There were still 2 charges and 1 capsule left in it. It could be fired again. He thought a little, put the revolver in his pocket, took his hat and went out. Chapter 6. He spent that evening till 10 o'clock going from one low haunt to another. Kasia too turned up and sang another gutter song, "How a Certain Villain and Tyrant Began kissing Kasia." Svidrigailov treated Kasia and the organ grinder and some singers and the waiters and 2 little clerks. He was particularly drawn to these clerks by the fact that they both had crooked noses, one bent to the left and the other to the right. They took him finally to a pleasure garden, where he paid for their entrance. There was 1 lanky 3-year-old pine tree and 3 bushes in the garden, besides a Vauxhall, which was in reality a drinking bar where tea too was served, and there were a few green tables and chairs standing round it. A chorus of wretched singers and a drunken but exceedingly depressed German clown from Munich, with a red nose, entertained the public. The clerks quarreled with some other clerks, and a fight seemed imminent. Svidrigailov was chosen to decide the dispute. He listened to them for a quarter of an hour, but they shouted so loud that there was no possibility of understanding them. The only fact that seemed certain was that one of them had stolen something, and had even succeeded in selling it on the spot to a Jew, but would not share the spoil with his companion. Finally, it appeared that the stolen object was a teaspoon belonging to the Vauxhall. It was missed, and the affair began to seem troublesome. Svidrigailov paid for the spoon, got up, and walked out of the garden. It was about 6 o'clock. He had not drunk a drop of wine all this time, and had ordered tea more for the sake of appearances than anything. It was a dark and stifling evening. Threatening storm clouds came over the sky about 10 o'clock. There was a clap of thunder, and the rain came down like a waterfall. The water fell not in drops, but beat on the earth in streams. There were flashes of lightning every minute, and each flash lasted while one could count 5. Drenched to the skin, he went home, locked himself in, opened the bureau, took out all his money and tore up 2 or 3 papers. Then, putting the money in his pocket, he was about to change his clothes, but looking out of the window and listening to the thunder and the rain, he gave up the idea, took up his hat and went out of the room without locking the door. He went straight to Sonya. She was at home. She was not alone. The 4 Kapernaumov children were with her. She was giving them tea. She received Svidrigailov in respectful silence, looking wonderingly at his soaking clothes. The children all ran away at once in indescribable terror. Svidrigailov sat down at the table and asked Sonya to sit beside him. She timidly prepared to listen. "I may be going to America, Sofya Semyonovna," said Svidrigailov, "and as I am probably seeing you for the last time, I have come to make some arrangements." "Well, did you see the lady today? I know what she said to you, you need not tell me." Sonya made a movement and blushed. "Those people have their own way of doing things. As to your sisters and your brother, they are really provided for, and the money assigned to them I've put into safekeeping and have received acknowledgments. You had better take charge of the receipts in case anything happens. Here, take them. Well, now that's settled. Here are 3 5% bonds to the value of 3,000 rubles. Take those for yourself, entirely for yourself, and let that be strictly between ourselves, so that no one knows of it whatever you hear. You will need the money, for to go on living in the old way, Sofya Semyonovna, is bad, and besides there is no need for it now. I am so much indebted to you, and so are the children and my stepmother," said Sonya hurriedly, "and if I've said so little, please don't consider." That's enough, that's enough. But as for the money, Arkady Ivanovich, I am very grateful to you, but I don't need it now. I can always earn my own living. Don't think me ungrateful. If you are so charitable, that money. It's for you, Sofya Semyonovna, and please don't waste words over it. I haven't time for it, you will want it. Rodion Romanovich has 2 alternatives, a bullet in the brain or Siberia. Sonya looked wildly at him and started. Don't be uneasy, I know all about it from himself and I am not a gossip, I won't tell anyone. It was good advice when you told him to give himself up and confess. It would be much better for him. Well, if it turns out to be Siberia, he will go and you will follow him. That's so, isn't it? And if so, you'll need money. You'll need it for him, do you understand? Giving it to you is the same as my giving it to him. Besides, you promised Amalia Ivanovna to pay what's owing. I heard you. How can you undertake such obligations so heedlessly, Sofya Semyonovna? It was Katerina Ivanovna's debt and not yours, so you ought not to have taken any notice of the German woman. You can't get through the world like that. If you're ever questioned about me, tomorrow or the day after you will be asked, don't say anything about my coming to see you now and don't show the money to anyone or say a word about it. Well, now goodbye. He got up. My greetings to Rodion Romanovich. By the way, you'd better put the money for the present in Mr. Razumihin's keeping. You know Mr. Razumihin? Of course you do. He's not a bad fellow. Take it to him tomorrow or, when the time comes. Until then, hide it carefully. Sonya, too, jumped up from her chair and looked in dismay at Svidrigailov. She longed to speak, to ask a question, but for the first moments she did not dare and did not know how to begin. How can you be going now in such rain? Why be starting for America and be stopped by rain? Ha ha, goodbye Sofya Semyonovna, my dear. Live and live long, you will be of use to others. By the way, tell Mr. Razumihin I send my greetings to him. Tell him Arkady Ivanovich Svidrigailov sends his greetings, be sure to. He went out, leaving Sonya in a state of wondering anxiety and vague apprehension. It appeared afterwards that on the same evening, at 11:20, he made another very eccentric and unexpected visit. The rain still persisted. Drenched to the skin, he walked into the little flat where the parents of his betrothed lived, in 3rd Street in Vasilyevsky Island. He knocked some time before he was admitted, and his visit at first caused great perturbation. But Svidrigailov could be very fascinating when he liked, so that the first, and indeed very intelligent surmise of the sensible parents that Svidrigailov had probably had so much to drink that he did not know what he was doing vanished immediately. The decrepit father was wheeled in to see Svidrigailov by the tender and sensible mother, who as usual began the conversation with various irrelevant questions. She never asked a direct question, but began by smiling and rubbing her hands, and then, if she were obliged to ascertain something, for instance, when Svidrigailov would like to have the wedding, she would begin by interested and almost eager questions about Paris and the court life there, and only by degrees brought the conversation round to 3rd Street. On other occasions this had of course been very impressive, but this time Arkady Ivanovich seemed particularly impatient, and insisted on seeing his betrothed at once, though he had been informed, to begin with, that she had already gone to bed. The girl of course appeared. Svidrigailov informed her at once that he was obliged by very important affairs to leave Petersburg for a time, and therefore brought her 15,000 rubles, and begged her accept them as a present from him, as he had long been intending to make her this trifling present before their wedding. The logical connection of the present with his immediate departure, and the absolute necessity of visiting them for that purpose in pouring rain at midnight was not made clear. But it all went off very well. Even the inevitable ejaculations of wonder and regret, the inevitable questions were extraordinarily few and restrained. On the other hand, the gratitude expressed was most glowing and was reinforced by tears from the most sensible of mothers. As Svidrigailov got up, laughed, kissed his betrothed, patted her cheek, declared he would soon come back, and noticing in her eyes, together with childish curiosity, a sort of earnest dumb inquiry, reflected and kissed her again, though he felt sincere anger inwardly at the thought that his present would be immediately locked up in the keeping of the most sensible of mothers. He went away, leaving them all in a state of extraordinary excitement, but the tender mamma, speaking quietly in a half-whisper, settled some of the most important of their doubts, concluding that Svidrigailov was a great man, a man of great affairs and connections and of great wealth. There was no knowing what he had in his mind. He would start off on a journey and give away money just as the fancy took him, so that there was nothing surprising about it. Of course it was strange that he was wet through, but Englishmen, for instance, are even more eccentric, and all these people of high society didn't think of what was said of them and didn't stand on ceremony. Possibly, indeed, he came like that on purpose to show that he was not afraid of anyone. Above all, not a word should be said about it, for God knows what might come of it, and the money must be locked up, and it was most fortunate that Fedosya, the cook, had not left the kitchen. And above all, not a word must be said to that old cat, Madame Reslik, and so on and so on. They sat up whispering till 2 o'clock, but the girl went to bed much earlier, amazed and rather sorrowful. Svidrigailov, meanwhile, exactly at midnight, crossed the bridge on the way back to the mainland. The rain had ceased and there was a roaring wind. He began shivering, and for one moment he gazed at the black waters of the little Neva with a look of special interest, even inquiry. But he soon felt it very cold, standing by the water. He turned and went towards Y Prospect. He walked along that endless street for a long time, almost half an hour, more than once stumbling in the dark on the wooden pavement, but continually looking for something on the right side of the street. He had noticed passing through this street lately that there was a hotel somewhere towards the end, built of wood, but fairly large, and its name he remembered was something like Adrianople. He was not mistaken. The hotel was so conspicuous in that godforsaken place that he could not fail to see it even in the dark. It was a long, blackened wooden building, and in spite of the late hour there were lights in the windows and signs of life within. He went in and asked a ragged fellow who met him in the corridor for a room. The latter, scanning Svidrigailov, pulled himself together and led him at once to a close and tiny room in the distance, at the end of the corridor, under the stairs. There was no other, all were occupied. The ragged fellow looked inquiringly. "Is there tea?" asked Svidrigailov. "Yes, sir." "What else is there?" "Veal vodka savories." "Bring me tea and veal." "And you want nothing else?" he asked with apparent surprise. "Nothing, nothing." The ragged man went away, completely disillusioned. It must be a nice place, thought Svidrigailov. How was it I didn't know it? I expect I look as if I came from a café chantant and have had some adventure on the way. It would be interesting to know who stayed here. He lighted the candle and looked at the room more carefully. It was a room so low-pitched that Svidrigailov could only just stand up in it. It had one window. The bed, which was very dirty, and the plain-stained chair and table almost filled it up. The walls looked as though they were made of planks, covered with shabby paper, so torn and dusty that the pattern was indistinguishable, though the general color, yellow, could still be made out. One of the walls was cut short by the sloping ceiling, though the room was not an attic but just under the stairs. Svidrigailov set down the candle, sat down on the bed and sank into thought. But a strange persistent murmur which sometimes rose to a shout in the next room attracted his attention. The murmur had not ceased from the moment he entered the room. He listened. Someone was upbraiding and almost tearfully scolding, but he heard only one voice. Svidrigailov got up, shaded the light with his hand, and at once he saw light through a crack in the wall. He went up and peeped through. The room, which was somewhat larger than his, had 2 occupants. One of them, a very curly-headed man with a red, inflamed face, was standing in the pose of an orator, without his coat, with his legs wide apart to preserve his balance, and smiting himself on the breast. He reproached the other with being a beggar, with having no standing whatever. He declared that he had taken the other out of the gutter, and he could turn him out when he liked, and that only the finger of Providence sees it all. The object of his reproaches was sitting in a chair, and had the air of a man who wants dreadfully to sneeze, but can't. He sometimes turned sheepish and befogged eyes on the speaker, but obviously had not the slightest idea what he was talking about and scarcely heard it. A candle was burning down on the table, there were wine glasses, a nearly empty bottle of vodka, bread and cucumber, and glasses with the dregs of stale tea. After gazing attentively at this, Svidrigailov turned away indifferently and sat down on the bed. The ragged attendant, returning with the tea, could not resist asking him again whether he didn't want anything more, and again receiving a negative reply, finally withdrew. Svidrigailov made haste to drink a glass of tea to warm himself, but could not eat anything. He began to feel feverish. He took off his coat and, wrapping himself in the blanket, lay down on the bed. He was annoyed. It would have been better to be well for the occasion, he thought with a smile. The room was close, the candle burnt dimly, the wind was roaring outside, he heard a mouse scratching in the corner and the room smelt of mice and of leather. He lay in a sort of reverie, one thought followed another. He felt a longing to fix his imagination on something. It must be a garden under the window, he thought. There's a sound of trees. How I dislike the sound of trees on a stormy night, in the dark. They give one a horrid feeling. He remembered how he had disliked it when he passed Petrovsky Park just now. This reminded him of the bridge over the Little Neva, and he felt cold again as he had when standing there. I never have liked water, he thought, even in a landscape, and he suddenly smiled again at a strange idea. Surely now all these questions of taste and comfort ought not to matter, but I've become more particular, like an animal that picks out a special place. For such an occasion, I ought to have gone into the Petrovsky Park. I suppose it seemed dark, cold, ha-ha, as though I were seeking pleasant sensations. By the way, why haven't I put out the candle? He blew it out. They've gone to bed next door, he thought, not seeing the light at the crack. Well now, Marfa Petrovna, now is the time for you to turn up, it's dark and the very time and place for you, but now you won't come. He suddenly recalled how, an hour before carrying out his design on Daunia, he had recommended Raskolnikov to trust her to Razumihin's keeping. I suppose I really did say it, as Raskolnikov guessed, to tease myself. But what a rogue that Raskolnikov is. He's gone through a good deal. He may be a successful rogue in time when he's got over his nonsense. But now he's too eager for life. These young men are contemptible on that point. But hang the fellow, let him please himself, it's nothing to do with me. He could not get to sleep. By degrees Daunia's image rose before him and a shudder ran over him. No, I must give up all that now, he thought, rousing himself. I must think of something else. It's queer and funny. I never had a great hatred for anyone. I never particularly desired to avenge myself even, and that's a bad sign, a bad sign, a bad sign. I never liked quarreling either, and never lost my temper, that's a bad sign too. And the promises I made her just now, too, damnation. But who knows? Perhaps she would have made a new man of me somehow. He ground his teeth and sank into silence again. Again Daunia's image rose before him, just as she was when, after shooting the first time, she had lowered the revolver in terror and gazed blankly at him, so that he might have seized her twice over, and she would not have lifted a hand to defend herself if he had not reminded her. He recalled how at that instant he felt almost sorry for her, how he had felt a pang at his heart. Damnation, these thoughts again, I must put it away. He was dozing off, the feverish shiver had ceased, when suddenly something seemed to run over his arm and leg under the bedclothes. He started. Hang it, I believe it's a mouse, he thought. That's the veal I left on the table. He felt fearfully disinclined to pull off the blanket, get up, get cold, but all at once something unpleasant ran over his leg again. He pulled off the blanket and lighted the candle. Shaking with feverish chill, he bent down to examine the bed. There was nothing. He shook the blanket and suddenly a mouse jumped out on the sheet. He tried to catch it, but the mouse ran to and fro in zigzags without leaving the bed, slipped between his fingers, ran over his hand and suddenly darted under the pillow. He threw down the pillow, but in one instant felt something leap on his chest and dart over his body and down his back under his shirt. He trembled nervously and woke up. The room was dark. He was lying on the bed and wrapped up in the blanket as before. The wind was howling under the window. How disgusting, he thought with annoyance. He got up and sat on the edge of the bedstead with his back to the window. It's better not to sleep at all, he decided. There was a cold, damp draft from the window, however. Without getting up, he drew the blanket over him and wrapped himself in it. He was not thinking of anything and did not want to think. But one image rose after another. Incoherent scraps of thought without beginning or end passed through his mind. He sank into drowsiness. Perhaps the cold, or the dampness, or the dark, or the wind that howled under the window and tossed the trees roused a sort of persistent craving for the fantastic. He kept dwelling on images of flowers. He fancied a charming flower garden, a bright, warm, almost hot day, a holiday Trinity day, a fine, sumptuous country cottage in the English taste overgrown with fragrant flowers, with flower beds going round the house. The porch, wreathed in climbers, was surrounded with beds of roses. A light, cool staircase, carpeted with rich rugs, was decorated with rare plants in china pots. He noticed particularly in the windows nosegays of tender, white, heavily fragrant narcissus bending over their bright, green, thick long stalks. He was reluctant to move away from them, but he went up the stairs and came into a large, high drawing room, and again everywhere, at the windows, the doors onto the balcony and on the balcony itself, were flowers. The floors were strewn with freshly cut fragrant hay. The windows were open. A fresh, cool, light air came into the room. The birds were chirruping under the window, and in the middle of the room, on a table covered with a white satin shroud, stood a coffin. The coffin was covered with white silk and edged with a thick white frill. Wreaths of flowers surrounded it on all sides. Among the flowers lay a girl in a white muslin dress, with her arms crossed and pressed on her bosom, as though carved out of marble. But her loose fair hair was wet. There was a wreath of roses on her head. The stern and already rigid profile of her face looked as though chiseled of marble too, and the smile on her pale lips was full of an immense unchildish misery and sorrowful appeal. Svidrigailov knew that girl. There was no holy image, no burning candle beside the coffin, no sound of prayers. The girl had drowned herself. She was only 14, but her heart was broken. And she had destroyed herself, crushed by an insult that had appalled and amazed that childish soul, had smirched that angel purity with unmerited disgrace and torn from her a last scream of despair, unheeded and brutally disregarded, on a dark night in the cold and wet while the wind howled. As Svidrigailov came to himself, got up from the bed and went to the window. He felt for the latch and opened it. The wind lashed furiously into the little room and stung his face and his chest, only covered with his shirt, as though with frost. Under the window there must have been something like a garden, and apparently a pleasure garden. There too, probably there were tea tables and singing in the daytime. Now drops of rain flew in at the window from the trees and bushes. It was dark as in a cellar, so that he could only just make out some dark blurs of objects. Svidrigailov, bending down with elbows on the windowsill, gazed for 5 minutes into the darkness. The boom of a cannon, followed by a second one, resounded in the darkness of the night. Ah, the signal! The river is overflowing, he thought. By morning it will be swirling down the street in the lower parts, flooding the basements and cellars. The cellar rats will swim out, and men will curse in the rain and wind as they drag their rubbish to their upper stories. What time is it now? And he had hardly thought it when, somewhere near, a clock on the wall, ticking away hurriedly, struck 3. Aha, it will be light in an hour. Why wait? I'll go out at once straight to the park. I'll choose a great bush there drenched with rain, so that as soon as one's shoulder touches it, millions of drops drip on one's head. He moved away from the window, shut it, lighted the candle, put on his waistcoat, his overcoat and his hat and went out, carrying the candle, into the passage to look for the ragged attendant who would be asleep somewhere in the midst of candle ends and all sorts of rubbish, to pay him for the room and leave the hotel. It's the best minute, I couldn't choose a better. He walked for some time through a long narrow corridor without finding anyone and was just going to call out, when suddenly in a dark corner between an old cupboard and the door he caught sight of a strange object which seemed to be alive. He bent down with the candle and saw a little girl, not more than 5 years old, shivering and crying, with her clothes as wet as a soaking house flannel. She did not seem afraid of Svidrigailov, but looked at him with blank amazement out of her big black eyes. Now and then she sobbed as children do when they have been crying a long time, but are beginning to be comforted. The child's face was pale and tired. She was numb with cold. How can she have come here? She must have hidden here and not slept all night. He began questioning her. The child, suddenly becoming animated, chattered away in her baby language, something about Mammy and that Mammy would beat her, and about some cup that she had bewoken. The child chattered on without stopping. He could only guess from what she said that she was a neglected child, whose mother, probably a drunken cook in the service of the hotel, whipped and frightened her. That the child had broken a cup of her mother's and was so frightened that she had run away the evening before, had hidden for a long while somewhere outside in the rain, at last had made her way in here, hidden behind the cupboard and spent the night there, crying and trembling from the damp, the darkness and the fear that she would be badly beaten for it. He took her in his arms, went back to his room, sat her on the bed and began undressing her. The torn shoes which she had on her stockingless feet were as wet as if they had been standing in a puddle all night. When he had undressed her, he put her on the bed, covered her up and wrapped her in the blanket from her head downwards. She fell asleep at once. Then he sank into dreary musing again. What folly to trouble myself, he decided suddenly with an oppressive feeling of annoyance. What idiocy! In vexation he took up the candle to go and look for the ragged attendant again and make haste to go away. Damn the child, he thought as he opened the door, but he turned again to see whether the child was asleep. He raised the blanket carefully. The child was sleeping soundly, she had got warm under the blanket, and her pale cheeks were flushed. But strange to say, that flush seemed brighter and coarser than the rosy cheeks of childhood. It's a flush of fever, thought Svidrigailov. It was like the flush from drinking, as though she had been given a full glass to drink. Her crimson lips were hot and glowing, but what was this? He suddenly fancied that her long black eyelashes were quivering, as though the lids were opening and a sly crafty eye peeped out with an unchildlike wink, as though the little girl were not asleep but pretending. Yes, it was so. Her lips parted in a smile. The corners of her mouth quivered, as though she were trying to control them. But now she quite gave up all effort. Now it was a grin, a broad grin. There was something shameless, provocative in that quite unchildish face. It was depravity, it was the face of a harlot, the shameless face of a French harlot. Now both eyes opened wide. They turned a glowing, shameless glance upon him. They laughed, invited him. There was something infinitely hideous and shocking in that laugh, in those eyes, in such nastiness in the face of a child. What, at 5 years old? Svidrigailov muttered in genuine horror. What does it mean? And now she turned to him, her little face all aglow, holding out her arms. Accursed child! Svidrigailov cried, raising his hand to strike her, but at that moment he woke up. He was in the same bed, still wrapped in the blanket. The candle had not been lighted, and daylight was streaming in at the windows. I've had nightmare all night. He got up angrily, feeling utterly shattered, his bones ached. There was a thick mist outside and he could see nothing. It was nearly 5. He had overslept himself. He got up, put on his still damp jacket and overcoat. Feeling the revolver in his pocket, he took it out and then he sat down, took a notebook out of his pocket and in the most conspicuous place on the title page wrote a few lines in large letters. Reading them over, he sank into thought with his elbows on the table. The revolver and the notebook lay beside him. Some flies woke up and settled on the untouched veal which was still on the table. He stared at them and at last with his free right hand began trying to catch one. He tried till he was tired but could not catch it. At last, realizing that he was engaged in this interesting pursuit, he started, got up and walked resolutely out of the room. A minute later he was in the street. A thick milky mist hung over the town. Svidrigailov walked along the slippery, dirty wooden pavement towards the Little Neva. He was picturing the waters of the Little Neva swollen in the night, Petrovsky Island, the wet paths, the wet grass, the wet trees and bushes and at last the bush. He began ill-humoredly staring at the houses, trying to think of something else. There was not a cabman or a passerby in the street. The bright yellow, wooden little houses looked dirty and dejected with their closed shutters. The cold and damp penetrated his whole body and he began to shiver. From time to time, he came across shop signs and read each carefully. At last, he reached the end of the wooden pavement and came to a big stone house. A dirty, shivering dog crossed his path with its tail between its legs. A man in a greatcoat lay face downwards, dead drunk, across the pavement. He looked at him and went on. A high tower stood up on the left. Bah, he shouted, here is a place. Why should it be Petrovsky? It will be in the presence of an official witness anyway. He almost smiled at this new thought, and turned into the street where there was the big house with the tower. At the great closed gates of the house, a little man stood with his shoulder leaning against them, wrapped in a gray soldier's coat, with a copper Achilles helmet on his head. He cast a drowsy and indifferent glance at Svidrigailov. His face wore that perpetual look of peevish dejection, which is so sourly printed on all faces of Jewish race without exception. They both, Svidrigailov and Achilles, stared at each other for a few minutes without speaking. At last it struck Achilles as irregular for a man not drunk to be standing 3 steps from him, staring and not saying a word. What do you want here? He said, without moving or changing his position. Nothing, brother, good morning, answered Svidrigailov. This isn't the place. I am going to foreign parts, brother. To foreign parts. To America. America. Svidrigailov took out the revolver and cocked it. Achilles raised his eyebrows. I say, this is not the place for such jokes. Why shouldn't it be the place? Because it is. Well, brother, I don't mind that. It's a good place. When you are asked, you just say he was going, he said, to America. He put the revolver to his right temple. You can't do it here, it's not the place, cried Achilles, rousing himself, his eyes growing bigger and bigger. Svidrigailov pulled the trigger. Chapter 7. The same day, about 7 o'clock in the evening, Raskolnikov was on his way to his mother's and sister's lodging, the lodging in Bakilyev's house which Razumihin had found for them. The stairs went up from the street. Raskolnikov walked with lagging steps, as though still hesitating whether to go or not. But nothing would have turned him back. His decision was taken. Besides, it doesn't matter, they still know nothing, he thought, and they are used to thinking of me as eccentric. He was appallingly dressed, his clothes torn and dirty, soaked with a night's rain. His face was almost distorted from fatigue, exposure, the inward conflict that had lasted for 24 hours. He had spent all the previous night alone, God knows where. But anyway, he had reached a decision. He knocked at the door, which was opened by his mother. Dounia was not at home. Even the servant happened to be out. At first Pulcheria Alexandrovna was speechless with joy and surprise. Then she took him by the hand and drew him into the room. Here you are, she began, faltering with joy. Don't be angry with me, Radia, for welcoming you so foolishly with tears. I am laughing, not crying. Did you think I was crying? No, I am delighted, but I've got into such a stupid habit of shedding tears. I've been like that ever since your father's death. I cry for anything. Sit down, dear boy, you must be tired. I see you are. Ah, how muddy you are. I was in the rain yesterday, mother. Raskolnikov began. No, Pulcheria Alexandrovna hurriedly interrupted. You thought I was going to cross-question you in the womanish way I used to. Don't be anxious. I understand it all. Now I've learned the ways here and truly I see for myself that they are better. I've made up my mind once for all. How could I understand your plans and expect you to give an account of them? God knows what concerns and plans you may have, or what ideas you're hatching, so it's not for me to keep nudging your elbow, asking you what you are thinking about. But my goodness, why am I running to and fro as though I were crazy? I am reading your article in the magazine for the third time, Radia. Dmitri Prokofitch brought it to me. Directly I saw it, I cried out to myself. There, foolish one, I thought. That's what he is busy about, that's the solution of the mystery. Learned people are always like that. He may have some new ideas in his head just now, he is thinking them over and I worry him and upset him. I read it, my dear, and of course there was a great deal I did not understand. But that's only natural, how should I? Show me, mother. Raskolnikov took the magazine and glanced at his article. Incongruous as it was with his mood and his circumstances, he felt that strange and bitter-sweet sensation that every author experiences the first time he sees himself in print. Besides, he was only 23. It lasted only a moment. After reading a few lines, he frowned and his heart throbbed with anguish. He recalled all the inward conflict of the preceding months. He flung the article on the table with disgust and anger. But however foolish I may be, Radia, I can see for myself that you will very soon be one of the leading, if not the leading man in the world of Russian thought. And they dared to think you were mad. You don't know, but they really thought that. Ah, the despicable creatures, how could they understand genius? And Dounia was all but believing it. What do you say to that? Your father sent twice to magazines. The first time poems, I've got the manuscript and will show you, and the second time a whole novel, I begged him to let me copy it out. And how we prayed that they should be taken, they were. I was breaking my heart, Radia, 6 or 7 days ago over your food and your clothes and the way you are living. But now I see again how foolish I was, for you can attain any position you like by your intellect and talent. No doubt you don't care about that for the present, and you are occupied with much more important matters. Dounia's not at home, mother. No, Radia, I often don't see her, she leaves me alone. Dmitri Prokofitch comes to see me, it's so good of him, and he always talks about you. He loves you and respects you, my dear. I don't say that Dounia is very wanting in consideration. I am not complaining. She has her ways and I have mine. She seems to have got some secrets of late, and I never have any secrets from you too. Of course, I am sure that Dounia has far too much sense, and besides she loves you and me. but I don't know what it will all lead to. You've made me so happy by coming now, Radia, but she has missed you by going out. When she comes in, I'll tell her. Your brother came in while you were out. Where have you been all this time? You mustn't spoil me, Radia, you know. Come when you can, but if you can't, it doesn't matter, I can wait. I shall know anyway that you are fond of me, that will be enough for me. I shall read what you write, I shall hear about you from everyone, and sometimes you'll come yourself to see me. What could be better? Here you've come now to comfort your mother, I see that. Here Pulcheria Alexandrovna began to cry. Here I am again, don't mind my foolishness. My goodness, why am I sitting here? She cried, jumping up. There is coffee and I don't offer you any. Ah, that's the selfishness of old age, I'll get it at once. Mother, don't trouble, I am going at once. I haven't come for that, please listen to me. Pulcheria Alexandrovna went up to him timidly. Mother, whatever happens, whatever you hear about me, whatever you are told about me, will you always love me as you do now? He asked suddenly from the fullness of his heart, as though not thinking of his words and not weighing them. Radia, what is the matter? How can you ask me such a question? Why, who will tell me anything about you? Besides, I shouldn't believe anyone, I should refuse to listen. I've come to assure you that I've always loved you, and I am glad that we are alone, even glad Dounia is out. He went on with the same impulse. I have come to tell you that though you will be unhappy, you must believe that your son loves you now more than himself, and that all you thought about me, that I was cruel and didn't care about you, was all a mistake. I shall never cease to love you. Well, that's enough. I thought I must do this and begin with this. Pulcheria Alexandrovna embraced him in silence, pressing him to her bosom and weeping gently. I don't know what is wrong with you, Radia, she said at last. I've been thinking all this time that we were simply boring you, and now I see that there is a great sorrow in store for you, and that's why you are miserable. I've foreseen it a long time, Radia. Forgive me for speaking about it. I keep thinking about it and lie awake at nights. Your sister lay talking in her sleep all last night, talking of nothing but you. I caught something, but I couldn't make it out. I felt all the morning as though I were going to be hanged, waiting for something, expecting something, and now it has come. Radia, where are you going? You are going away somewhere. Yes. That's what I thought. I can come with you, you know, if you need me. And Dounia too, she loves you dearly, and Sofya Semyonovna may come with us if you like. You see, I am glad to look upon her as a daughter even. Dmitri Prokofitch will help us to go together. But, where are you going? Goodbye, mother. What today? She cried, as though losing him forever. I can't stay, I must go now. And can't I come with you? No, but kneel down and pray to God for me. Your prayer perhaps will reach him. Let me bless you and sign you with the cross. That's right. Oh God, what are we doing? Yes, he was glad. He was very glad that there was no one there, that he was alone with his mother. For the first time after all those awful months, his heart was softened. He fell down before her, he kissed her feet and both wept, embracing. And she was not surprised and did not question him this time. For some days she had realized that something awful was happening to her son, and that now some terrible minute had come for him. Radia, my darling, my firstborn, she said sobbing, now you are just as when you were little. You would run like this to me and hug me and kiss me. When your father was living and we were poor, you comforted us simply by being with us, and when I buried your father, how often we wept together at his grave and embraced, as now. And if I've been crying lately, it's that my mother's heart had a foreboding of trouble. The first time I saw you, that evening, you remember, as soon as we arrived here, I guessed simply from your eyes. My heart sank at once, and today when I opened the door and looked at you, I thought the fatal hour had come. Radia, you are not going away today. No. You'll come again. Yes, I'll come. Radia, don't be angry, I don't dare to question you, I know I mustn't. Only say 2 words to me, is it far where you are going? Very far. What is awaiting you there, some post or career for you? What God sends, only pray for me. Raskolnikov went to the door, but she clutched him and gazed despairingly into his eyes. Her face worked with terror. Enough, mother, said Raskolnikov, deeply regretting that he had come. Not forever, it's not yet forever. You'll come tomorrow. I will, goodbye. He tore himself away at last. It was a warm, fresh, bright evening. It had cleared up in the morning. Raskolnikov went to his lodgings. He made haste. He wanted to finish all before sunset. He did not want to meet anyone till then. Going up the stairs, he noticed that Nastasia rushed from the samovar to watch him intently. Can anyone have come to see me? He wondered. He had a disgusted vision of Porfiry, but opening his door he saw Dounia. She was sitting alone, plunged in deep thought, and looked as though she had been waiting a long time. He stopped short in the doorway. She rose from the sofa in dismay and stood up facing him. Her eyes, fixed upon him, betrayed horror and infinite grief, and from those eyes alone he saw at once that she knew. Am I to come in or go away? He asked uncertainly. I've been all day with Sofya Semyonovna. We were both waiting for you. We thought that you would be sure to come there. Raskolnikov went into the room and sank exhausted on a chair. I feel weak, Dounia. I am very tired, and I should have liked at this moment to be able to control myself.